Today's interview is with Seth Ferguson. Seth's up in Toronto, Canada. Seth talks about how he started out wanting to be an ice hockey referee, which, doesn't appeal to all of us, being in charge of 10 crazy, angry ice hockey players, but that was his dream. But he then transitioned into real estate and being an agent, into then investing in single family, into then investing into commercial. So a lot of good stuff in today's interview. So stick around for all of it. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review if you think it's worthy, and I'm sure it is. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate and you just want to chat, there's a link in the description down below, or you can go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, the website, and sign up there. I'd love to get to know you more, see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. But before that, enjoy today's interesting and amazing interview with Seth Ferguson.
Let's roll.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barry Griffiths. Now we have the lovely Seth Ferguson joining us here today. How are you doing, Seth?
I feel lovely.
I don't know why I use the word lovely, but you definitely... Have you ever been called lovely before by another guy?
I don't. First time for everything.
I like it to be a unique experience here on the show. So, hey man, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time. We got to chat a while back and it was great. So I'm excited to have you on the show. Before we jump into the conversation, which who knows where we'll go with it after that introduction. But can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you've been up to, and what you're up to currently?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, my name's Seth Ferguson, and I am the CEO of a real estate investment company called Multifamily Real Estate Investments, Inc. And what we do is we provide investment opportunities for high net worth individuals through acquiring and improving underperforming apartment buildings. So this is stuff that you talk about all the time on your podcast. And I've been in real estate for 13 years. And I also hosted a real estate TV show and an investment real estate podcast. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a lot of real estate to unpack there. But before that, give us an idea about like your background. Like, did you go to school? What have you been doing for work? Like, just give us a bit of more of a background about you as a person before we dive into the real estate.
Yeah. So before real estate was in the picture, my dream was to make the NHL as a hockey referee. That was my goal. So for the longest time, I refereed, some major juniors, some professional hockey, and I was trying to make a go of that and make the NHL. That didn't work. But my window closed. A lot of guys I worked with actually went on and made the NHL. So it's cool to turn on the TV and be like, hey, I know that guy. So that's a lot of fun. So I actually got started selling houses. So I became a real estate broker because it worked well with hockey. I could go and travel and live on the road doing hockey and sell real estate. And it worked hand to hand. But at some point, I realized that I was making commissions, but the money was coming in and then the money was going out. I wasn't really accumulating or building anything. And you look at Robert Kiyosaki, guys like that, it's all about creating a portfolio. I was making what most people would consider really good money, but it was just going in to fund my lifestyle and nothing was really growing. So then I started buying single family homes, duplexes, that sort of thing. And then I needed to scale bigger, and I realized I would have to own 1,000 houses to hit my real estate goal. And then I knew it was time to find something else other than single family homes to invest in. So that's what led me to multifamily.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm always surprised by, I speak to a lot of people, not necessarily on this show, but just in life about their jobs and what they do. And, these people are making, 100, 200, 300,000 sometimes, but
Mhm.
outside of that, outside of the job and what they do, they have nothing to show for it and nothing planned for it, you know. And I don't know if it's an education thing or it's a personality thing. Sometimes I think people who, you know, depending on their work, they like to spend every penny they have. You know, they have a nice car, they have a big house, they're out to eat every night, they're in the nightclubs on the weekends, they're, you know, spending all this money, and that's great. But you know, I'm always amazed that, you know, someone who makes 200, 300,000 a year, you're a smart person, right? You can't just fall into that job necessarily and make that kind of money. But to have nothing to show for it and have no ambition to invest or make, you know, kind of that passive income always surprises me.
Yeah, and when I look back, the most amount of money I've ever made was from stuff I owned. It wasn't from the, I guess, the earned income I was making. It was all from the assets I owned. So, you know, that should be the light bulb. Hey, I just need to get more assets rather than just work more hours. The other thing I think for me was, you know, you mentioned education too. I think that has a lot to do with it, because if I could go back in time, I would do so many things different. You know, one thing was when I started making money, my dad told me, he's like, you know, you need a nicer car. But, you know, in retrospect, I should have taken that $1,000 I was paying for my, you know, the Mercedes at the time and used that to buy another house. You know, there's just, you know, we make decisions based on advice we're getting from people and from what we see other people doing. But then, you know, once you kind of learn, are those really the right people to be getting advice from and looking to for guidance? Probably not. So yeah, I so many things I would change if I could go back in time. I would cut my expenses. I probably would have put it in a basement apartment in my house at the time, you know, cut down my mortgage expenses. But, you know, hey, we live and learn, right?
Yeah, exactly. Me the same. So many mistakes. You know, I kind of fell in that trap because I didn't necessarily have bad financial education, but I definitely didn't have good ones. It's like you said, your dad was telling you, "Oh, you make more money, so you buy a nicer car, right?" And same
Yeah.
with me, I made more money, so I spent more money on stuff, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
investment; it was stuff, and so much of that stuff that I don't think I own. I don't even have it now. You know, I'm talking, you know, clothes, like stuff, right? iPads, things like that. But looking back, if I could go back now and reinvest that money I wasted on the stupidest, dumbish stuff, and I just didn't understand that, you know, I would have been in a better position. But at the same time, we can't go back, right? And we're here now as well, and that's the main thing. Some people never get to where we are now, and it's not like we're high and mighty and we think we're amazing, or I don't think I do. Maybe you're lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not that we're judging anyone. It's just that we're happy that we've reached. You know, I'm really happy to have understood things now, and there's still an evolving education every single day about all this stuff. And I'm happy that I'm in the right lane for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a phase you have to go through, because, you know, now I've had the nice car, I've had all that stuff. So now for the future, I can be like, okay, well, I've had it. It feels good for a little bit. It feels nice to drive the nice car, especially when you're a younger guy, right? But it doesn't really mean too much now. Now I'm more concerned about what does my balance sheet look like and what does the cash flow look like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all have to kind of go through that phase, whether it's buying nice suits, you know, buying nice shoes, buying nice clothes, buying nice, you know, having the best TV and stuff. Once we go through it and we realize it's not all that it's stacked up to be, then we can really focus on what matters. And that's, you know, the cash flow, you know, the growth opportunities and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really true. The what car do you drive now, out of interest, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, well, I've got a Jag, so
Okay.
I talked about the nice car, but however, you know, I was able to acquire that through an interesting situation. So the price tag was not nearly what it was with the Mercedes back in the day. So
Okay.
I've cut that expense drastically. So.
Can I ask you about the story, or is that a private
Oh,
story?
no. It was just, I acquired it secondhand, and, you know, with vehicles, you know, you can lease your car, you can finance the car, you can just buy it outright. Usually I would lease because it's better for tax purposes. But in this case, I was able to pick it up at a very attractive price, just with cash, which is what you shouldn't do. But, you know, I don't even have to worry about the expense or anything. It's, yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's it. Yeah, buying a car is one of my least favorite things. I'm going through it right now. We had a lease, and which was nice because it was just no worries, no hassle. But
Yeah.
we're going through that process now, and I don't know if it's November 23rd right now, and things are crazy for car prices here now because
Yeah.
the supply has dropped way down because I don't think they're manufacturing. I don't think they're transporting nowhere near as much vehicles. So now a brand new car, as opposed to a 2-year-old car, depending on mileage, is pretty close in pricing. It's nuts.
It's nuts. I could sell my used Jag right now for more than I bought it for, which is ridiculous. And I actually, while you were asking the story about the circumstances, we'll roll that into the worst real estate decision I ever made because there's interesting circumstances with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna finance it because and I think there's nothing. Either or, I think it's a bad decision buying a car anyway, right? You're going to lose money and it's not.
Oh, it's a depreciating asset, right? Like, especially if you're buying a brand, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it loses so much value. So yeah, like it's not like a piece of real estate where you can improve it.
But we have to have it, unfortunately, right? It's an unfortunate thing. Hey, I've got to go back, right? I know we dived into the real estate and all that stuff that we cited, but I got to go back to the hockey stuff, right? So where are you? To give people context, this might make a little bit more sense, right? Where are you, first and foremost?
Yeah, so I live just outside of Toronto in Canada, so it's a big hockey place. There's hockey everywhere you look. So yeah, I'm definitely a Canadian.
That's cool. So where do you think that appeal came from being a referee, right? From being refereeing a hockey match probably isn't that attractive to many other people, right? Was it 5-on-5 or 6 or 10 crazy hockey players wanting to kill you if you make the wrong decision, right? That might not always be everyone's favorite kind of idea of fun and dream. Where did that come from for you think?
Yeah, well, like everybody, I started off playing hockey. And then, when I got to 15 or so, I realized I wasn't going to go much farther playing. I could probably play junior hockey somewhere, but I wasn't going to progress to like a high level, as in like a professional level playing. That was not even remotely close. But I started refereeing, doing little kids when I was like 13 years old. It was a great part-time job. And I found that, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. I can see myself progressing and go much farther than I ever would playing. So I decided to make the switch and take the refereeing a lot more seriously. And then, yeah, like you have to be crazy to be a referee. So there's not, well, actually you might understand, like, with wrestling, you always have like your bad guy and everybody boos the bad guy. That's kind of like being the referee. So there's nothing better than, you make a call and then all 10,000 people in the rink start booing you. But I learned a lot refereeing. I think it makes you a better person. You're dealing with conflict all the time because, your players, the players and the coaches are always obviously very emotional because they care about what they're doing. They want to win. So you have to get really good at, understanding conflict, dealing with emotions, getting to the root of the problem or the source of their frustration. So communication is key. It's so important. You have to have the confidence to make decisions because everybody in the rink wants to, bias your decision-making one way or the other. You have to stay very clear-headed and focused. You have to make split-second decisions. So you see a play, you react to it. So it makes you quick on your feet. You have to be very sharp with it. And I think it just makes you, and it forces you to be humble because every referee wants to be perfect all the time, but we're human and that's impossible. Like mistakes will happen. So you have to be very cognizant of the fact that you're right 99% of the time. It's amazing how often you are right, but it's that 1% time and everybody eats you up for it. So that goes back to communication. When you do make a mistake, how do you approach it? How do you communicate that with the team, with the players? And I loved it. Like you have to thrive on the pressure of it because there is so much pressure on you, especially when you get into important games. The crowd's there, the players there, the intensity is so high, which is one of the beautiful things about sport. The intensity and the emotion is what makes it great. But on the referee side, you have to almost remove yourself from it. Because if you get worked up, you just get sucked into it and you can't make a clear level-headed decision. So that I went off a little bit of a tangent
No,
there, but
no.
yeah,
You know what's interesting about that to me is that it seems like it's a really transferable skill to real estate, right? It's like so many
huge.
of those skills that you just, almost every one of those skills that you mentioned is a skill that you need to be a successful real estate investor.
100%. And actually, another profession. A lot of referees, they get recruited to be police officers because refereeing, you're not getting shot at, but it's the same. Like, you're dealing with volatile situations, emotional people. You have to make split-second decisions. You're applying rules and laws. So yeah, a lot of the guys get recruited to become cops. But yeah, like you said, with real estate, there's lots of pressure in real estate deals. You have to communicate especially well, whether it's to potential investors or to the seller, to brokers. You have to assess situations and make decisions based on what you're seeing. You don't always know what other people are thinking. Just like refereeing, you see a guy get cross-checked in the face, let's say. You don't know why he did it. You might not have seen what led up to it, but you see the situation. You have to go with what you know to be true. Yeah, so many transferable skills. I think, I'm biased, but refereeing forced me to improve myself and become better at almost all of those things, because you can't attain a high level refereeing. Like, I did national championships and all that stuff. You can't attain that high level unless you do improve yourself. And it really points out the weak spots that you have personally, because that's where you're going to have all your issues. Like, when I was younger, I would almost brush off an angry coach who was yelling, rather than not confronting him, but asking him why, and really seeing through the emotion to see through to the root of the problem. When I was younger, I would just see the emotion and the yelling, and I would discount him. But that was a mistake, right? So, but I learned through that, and you come to become a better person because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always interesting to me, is the reason why people feel a certain way, right? Like,
Yeah.
like yesterday I was on a flight, right? And the air hostess was so strict on everyone wearing masks, right? And they should, but if it was slightly down, she would be, she was crazy about it. She was OCD about it. She was obsessing about it. And she even, one guy that she told twice or something, she even gave him it was the Delta flight, gave him a letter saying that it was like a final warning, and if he does it again, he won't be able to fly Delta again. And she was a little crazy about it. But then it got me thinking, well, yes, I could label her as crazy, and I could think that she's being obnoxious, whatever, but there might be a reason behind that she is that. Did a family member die from that? Did she have some kind of underlying health issue? Does she have family members that had underlying health issues? There's rarely an action or an emotion or a behavior that has nothing behind it, right? And I think, just like you pointed out there, and this is transferable to real estate, again, this is why I'm saying it, is that if we're able to understand the emotion, understand the behavior, understand why they're acting like that, it gives us, it better serves us to be able to work with that person. So if it's a motivated seller, if it's a difficult contractor, if it's whatever it is, a broker that's not replying to your messages, or whatever it is, if you try and understand the situation and why that person is like that, then you can act appropriately, right? If you just react to the emotion and react to the bad behavior, that doesn't really serve you. That's only going to get you one reaction usually.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of the time, it's people just want to feel heard. So, like, I'll talk about hockey, then I'll translate it to real estate.
Yeah.
So with hockey, a coach might be upset that a call didn't go their way. The coach knows you can't go back on your call. He just wants you to know that you're hearing his, side of the story. That's all he cares about. He just wants to feel heard. Mm-hmm. Same thing with, let's say you're dealing with the seller and they get upset at your offer and they come back. They just want to feel heard. They just want to know that you understood what they're saying. They might not like your reply. Same with the coach. The coach might be yelling, or a player might be angry about a high stick or something. They might not like your reply, but they will at least respect the fact that, you listen to them, they feel heard. And when they calm down a couple minutes later, they'll usually come up to you and say, hey, thanks for listening. I got a little heated. Sorry. Same thing with real estate deals. Sometimes, when there's a lot of money on the table, people get their backs up and people can dig into some interesting situation, or they can dig themselves into interesting positions based on principle. And, they just want to feel heard. And then when they calm down, they'll usually come back and say, hey, thanks for understanding. I was, I said some things I didn't really mean to. Let's move on. So yeah, that's a great skill to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to ask you before we dive into more of the real estate stuff outside the referee. Yeah. So there's a lot of fights, right? That's one of the favorite things I have about hockey. There's always fights, right? Did you see some crazy fights? Like, what was some of the craziest fights you saw?
Oh boy. I've had a bunch of line brawls. So like where everybody on the ice starts going at it. That's always fun.
So I remember how many players, how many people are you talking in that?
Yeah, so there would be 10 players, so 5 from each team fighting. Then the 2 goalies sometimes get into it. One time, this was back when I was doing junior A hockey. End of the game, we had fans throwing things at the visiting team, and then the visiting team started hitting the fans with their sticks and trying to go up into the stands. That was interesting. So some pretty crazy situations.
That's pretty nuts. Yeah. Just, I love that though. I love a lot of times, like hockey's kind of a little bit like rugby. I don't know if you're familiar with rugby.
So
a rugby pitch, and then afterwards they'll have a beer with each other. I laugh about how they hit each other. And it's kind of like hockey, right? They'll get into the fight and they'll be angry for a while, right? But they'll get into the fight and then you pull them apart. This is what I see on TV. You pull them apart, and then they're like, "Okay, I'll go to the sin bin now." You know, I always
well, that's the thing with fighting. I'll talk about this for a couple minutes because most people don't realize. So, like on most teams, you've got like your tough guys, like the fighters. Those guys, they'll do their job. They'll fight. You step in, it's done. The fights that get dangerous are the guys who fight and they don't usually fight. They're not usual fighters. They're the guys who are fighting because it's all emotion. Though that's where you get guys where, one guy's in a compromised position and he'll still keep hitting them or try and take a couple cheap shots. You get your regular fighters, like if they see a guy take a hit and, kind of go down, they won't hit it. Like they know the way it's played. It's when you get the guys who are just fighting based on emotion. They're not used to fighting. That's when you usually have issues. So most fans don't really realize that. They're like, lots of people talk about, fighting in hockey, it's all bad. Like when you get the guys who fight regularly, they know how it's played. There's the code, right? And they don't really take liberty. Like they legitimately look after each other. Mm-hmm. If a guy's down or if he's if he's kind of knocked out a bit, like they won't keep filling him in. So
that's so interesting. I knew there was players on each team that their job was to fight and to protect the other skillful players per se, right?
Yeah.
I never thought about that the other guys, when they fight, and that makes perfect sense. When your job is to fight, you're just going to fight, and then that's it. Once it's done, right? It's no big deal. It's my job. Yeah. But when you're fighting from protecting yourself or your anger or whatever like that, whatever the emotion is, you can't control that, right? Because we're emotional human beings, and once you're gone, right? So I never thought that's really interesting.
Yeah. You always go by the look in the guy's eye. Like everybody knows the crazy eyes when the switch flips. Like whenever you see a guy's eyes and he's just not there, that's when you know it's game time.
What is one last question on that, Matt, because this is interesting to me, is what is referee protocol in this? Do you just try and let them burn it out? Like, do you get in the middle? Have you been slapped a few times?
So with me, I was fortunate. I was we've got referees and you have linesmen. The referee, we don't even touch the players. We're just there calling penalties. It's the linesmen who are the big boys. So, those are the guys who are like 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", with some good weight behind them. They're the guys who go in and break up the players. So I got to stand back and just enjoy the fight. It's the linesmen have to go in. But like I said, you have 2 guys who are used to fighting. Linesmen step in, they'll stop throwing, and then it's all good. It's just when you have guys who don't usually fight, like they'll try and keep throwing. And I've seen some linesmen take some punches in the face because, like they're just going in, doing their job. And, a guy wants to keep going and throws a punch and it lands in the guy's mouth. And
dangerous job then.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for talking about all that. I hope you were as interested as I was. I know that's really interesting to me. But then, you said you started in real estate on the selling side, right? On representing buyers and sellers. Why did you go that route? After college, school, whatever it was. Why did you go into real estate?
Well, like I said, I thought real estate, people have the impression until they start doing it, that, you know, it's a very flexible schedule. You can do anything you want, whenever you want. So here I am doing hockey, still trying to make the NHL. I figured, hey, I'll get my real estate license. My dad had a brokerage at the time. I said, hey, I'll just start selling real estate. It'll work really well with, you know, I can set my own hours. I didn't realize that people are looking at houses in the evening, on the weekends. And that's when hockey games are, evenings and weekends. And it's, you know, if you want to succeed in anything, you have to put the hours in, you have to be dedicated to it. So it's not, a lot of people have the impression that real estate brokers are they're just living a lifestyle and it's all glamorous. No, like if you want to be in the top percentage, you have to put in a lot of hours. You have to work hard. You have to be really dedicated. You're working every day, you know, 7 days a week. And I learned that as I started building up my business. But at the start, it was like, hey, I want to pursue my hockey dream. And this is a way for me to, you know, have a real job, quote unquote, and start earning some money.
Interesting. So, but obviously you went, so to have a flexible job, there's a few different flexible jobs, but I'm guessing it was your dad being a broker that attracted you to that kind of, to real estate.
Yeah. Plus, you know, I thought I could do well with it as well. And obviously, like, the income earning potential is pretty high there. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like everybody talks about the 80-20 rule. In real estate, it's a 95-5 rule. Like 5% of the brokers make all the money. So, you know, once you get into that 5%, it can be very lucrative. You're well compensated for what you do, but you got to put in so much time and effort into building yourself up to that top 5%.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely true. You know, the 80, I always say that the 80-20 isn't strong enough to, you know, when you speak with commercial brokers or even residential real estate agents, you find out which ones are the good ones. And for anyone, I think that's a good piece of advice for anyone listening now who's trying to find a broker for commercial property, for apartment complex, or trying to find an agent for residential. You want to find someone who's in that 5%, right? Now, it might be challenging because if you're in that 5%, you're usually getting plenty of work because you've got good referrals, you know, you have a good history, people know you're good, but you know, you want to try and get in front of them. There's different ways to do that, but I would definitely say you want to try and find some that are in that 5%, because they're the ones that they can make you the money, right? If you find a good agent, they're going to make you that money.
100%. And the biggest mistake I see people making when they're selling properties, let's say, is lots of people think, oh, well, I'll just save money on my real estate fees. I'll choose the cheap person. There's a reason why they're being cheap, why they're cutting their rates, because they can't get clients otherwise. Like, you know, when you're working with that top 5% person, they'll charge you more, but it's so well worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You pay people what they're worth, right? And if you pay people less, it means that's what they're worth, and that's what you're going to get in return for that. So, cool. So you started out as an agent. How was it starting out? Did your dad help you a lot, or were you more out on your own? How did that?
No, you gotta pound the pavement. So I got my very first listing knocking on doors. Okay. It was somebody trying to sell their home privately. And I kept knocking on the door. It was a rental property they had, so I kept going back to them. And eventually, after a number of months, you know, they needed to sell it, so I listed it. That was my very first listing. So, yeah, that's how I got going. But it's, you know, you just have to communicate well. You have to be on top of the market. You know, you have to add lots of value to people. You know, it's so much more than just, there's so many, if somebody's looking for a real estate broker just to open a door and show them the house, mm-hmm. You're just the commodity. But if you want somebody who can actually understand the forces at work in the market and help somebody make educated real estate decisions, that's a totally different level that you're operating on, and you will be compensated accordingly.
Yeah. Well, how did you get to the level? Was it just education and studying? Was it?
Yeah, you have to educate yourself. Like, you have to study what drives a real estate market. What are the market fundamentals? You learn about the real estate cycle. You know, I always tell people, and, you know, I might get flack for saying it, but like, let's say we go out and talk to 10 real estate agents out there, and we ask them to explain, you know, where their market is in the real estate cycle right now. What, you know, are they in the slump phase, recovery, peak? I'd say 9 out of 10 wouldn't be able to give you an educated answer. And to me, that's mind blowing, because if I'm buying into a market, or if I want to make a move, like the move, my decisions should be based on, market fundamentals, what's going on in the market. And most agents can't do that. They're just there to open doors. Robert Kiyosaki talks a lot about that. He's like, why do they call real estate brokers brokers? Because they're broker than you. So, it all goes back to working with the top 5%, because that top 5%, they'll know the market. They will know exactly what's going on. They'll be able to guide you in making the best decision possible, whether it's, buying your own primary residence or getting into investment properties. They'll be able to help because they've got the experience, they have the volume, they know what's going on. They'll see opportunities that you won't see yourself because, they're doing hundreds of deals a year. Most people in their lifetime only do a handful of deals with their own house. So you just think of it from that way. Like they'll just be able to open your mind and help you see things that you would be blind to otherwise.
Yeah. So how long were you're still an agent, I believe, right? You're still a broker.
Oh yeah. I still hold my broker's license. It's something I probably won't give up because it's a good license to have. And then honestly, if I let it lapse, then I'll have to go through the courses again to get it. So I might as well keep writing the test every 2 years and keep it active.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how long was it you were a broker before you made your first investment? And what was your first investment?
Oh boy. Yeah. So there was probably 6 years, I think. Mm-hmm. I've been in real estate in different capacities for about 13 years now. So it was probably after 6 years that I realized, hey, like I had nice houses that I was living in myself, but I realized it was time to start acquiring other properties because, you read books and you see these guys and they're building their wealth through acquiring assets. I didn't really know exactly how it was done, but I knew the product really well because I was selling it every day. I didn't know about the commercial real estate opportunities. I just knew about single family homes. So that's what I started acquiring. And I did well with it because, you have the market knowledge and I knew what properties to buy and what areas and what to look for. So I had a leg up that way, but it wasn't scalable because one of the things a lot of investors find is they'll hit a wall at some point if they're dealing with single family homes, whether it's financing, you don't fit inside the lender's box anymore. So you can't get financing. They run out of capital on their own. So they'll have to start partnering with other people. It's not scalable in building a large portfolio with single family homes. And throwing in the Canadian angle, financing north of the border, so in Canada, is way tighter than it is in the States. So the lender's criteria, the box you have to fit in is so small, it makes it very challenging to grow that single family portfolio. So if I would have known about commercial real estate back in the day, if I could go back in time, I would have sat myself down and said, hey, listen, there's these things called, apartment buildings. You should start buying these. Don't start buying a house or a duplex.
Yeah, me the same, exact same thing. I would have gone back 10 years and I would have been in a completely different position. But it's easy to say that, right? It's if I knew next week's lottery numbers, it would be better as well. So it's all good. It's all a learning process. What do you think it took you 6 years though? You're obviously in real estate. You're probably working with investors. You're seeing them make money. You're seeing the money that can be made in real estate. Was there any reason you think that it took a few years?
I would say, when I first started out, I wasn't really dealing with investor clients. It was more people just buying and selling their family home. In my family, I didn't have anybody in my immediate circle that had, acquired real estate. My parents owned their house, but they didn't own investment properties. I can't think of anybody in my close circle that I knew that I would speak to all the time who had built something in real estate. So it just really wasn't on my radar. I knew that you wanted to buy a house and then people move up and then you start with a townhouse, then you buy a bigger house and a bigger house. That was on my radar. So I think, you know, one of the things, and we were talking before we started about kids and all that stuff. One of the things I want to be able to show my son is, you know, the opportunities out there, whether it's real estate or other assets that you can buy. Because I think that the people who start earlier in real estate, they have been exposed to it, whether it's through a grandparent, a parent, an uncle, an aunt, something like that. Something has the light bulb go off in their minds because they've been introduced to it somehow. If you're not introduced to it, you just have to stumble upon it. And I kind of stumbled upon it. Like I was selling and buying houses, and then it just clicked for some reason. Hey, I should buy more of these houses. But there was really nobody in my network who had built a real estate portfolio.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think, you know, the more you're surrounded by, the more you see that it's possible, right? But unless you have that surroundings, you know, you, like you said, you've got to stumble on it somehow, and that's kind of how a lot of people get into it. You said financing can be difficult there. What does financing look like there in Canada?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is, you know, let's say in the States, you can buy a house and you can have a 30-year mortgage. In Canada, all of our mortgages are basically balloon payments. So you have a 5-year term, it's amortized over 30 years, let's say, but after 5 years, you got the balloon payment, you got to, you know, refinance the property. So it's really interesting because in the States, you know, it's, oh, well, I can buy a house and then whatever my mortgage rate is, I've got it locked in for the next 30 years. In Canada, you're a lot more susceptible to rate changes. And the government's very cautious. And that's why we have tighter lending restrictions, because at any given point, 25% of the population who owns a house will be refinancing their property. So you could have locked in for 4% 1 year, and then in 5 years it could be 5%. So now you're, you know, so you have to be really cognizant of that. And just the banks are very, very strict. And, you know, I would say fortunately for the housing market, we avoided a lot of the 2008 issues because of the lender restrictions, and they were a lot tighter. So we weren't really susceptible to like the widespread, I guess, chaos that unfolded in a large part of the US. So there's pros and cons, but if you're looking to grow a residential portfolio, it is very, very challenging to get a bank to fund a large portfolio. You almost have to hop to private lenders, and that can get expensive.
That's crazy. Every 5 years you've got to refinance your loan. They don't go out any longer than 5 years.
No. So you're, you know, typically speaking, you'll do 3 to 5 year term. It's amortized over 25 years, 30 years, something like that. But yeah, it's a balloon payment. Which is, you know, it's just like commercial financing, right? Like you've got, let's say, your 10-year term, then you've got your balloon or 5-year term. But yeah, it's a different system, and it goes back to the what is it? I think it's the early 1900s. There was a law where it was illegal for loans, or there was a law in Canada where it had something to do with loans from the bank, and they can't have it over 5 years. So that's why we ended up with this balloon system. And in the States, it went the other way. There was a law in the book. I can't remember which one it was. In one of the talks I did, I brought it up. I just can't remember it.
Yeah, that's interesting that they haven't changed it. But it puts pressure on you, right? You've got to some extent if you get underwater on your property, that could be an issue. If you have a 3, you know, because 3 years isn't a lot of, you're not paying a lot of principal down in 3 years initially, right? If you overpay for a property and there's a slight change in the market, you could be in trouble in 3 years, I guess.
For sure. The other thing to keep in mind too is the government a couple of years ago introduced a stress test. So now when you qualify for your residential mortgage, you have to qualify at a couple percentage points higher than what your actually interest rate is. So imagine 5 years ago, you entered into a mortgage, there was no stress test. And now your balloon payment's coming up. Now there's this new stress test. Your income has stayed the same, but now you have to qualify at 2 points higher. So these are the things, these are the unforeseeable, intangible factors that come into play. Yeah, you just have to be really aware of it.
So have many people got in trouble with that, losing their homes, foreclosed on, this kind of issue?
Well, no, there was a crunch, I would say. So some people were forced into situations they had to go down to a B lender who would, look how to loosen up the box a bit to get them qualified. But there was definitely in the GTA Greater Toronto area, there was definitely a lull in the market. Stress tests hit. There was a correction of about 18% or so in market prices when that first came out. That was short-lived. It was only 5-6 months, and then things came back. But yeah, it definitely made its impact felt on the market for sure.
What does the market look like there right now in Toronto? Is it similar to the US, just low inventory, high prices, low interest rates?
Yeah, the GTA on the residential side, very low inventory. It's been a hot market for the past, ever since 2010, I would say. It's been quite hot. We had a correction in 2017, but that, we have surpassed that peak again. Ridiculously high prices. You're buying townhouses for $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, and it's pretty crazy. On my podcast, I almost laugh sometimes because I'll have some people who do single family home investing. I'll interview them, and they talk about properties they bought for $50,000, $100,000, and where I'm living, buying a detached house, you're at least $900,000 to $900,000 plus for a detached house with a lot. So, yeah.
That's great for an agent. If you're an agent, that's what you want.
For sure, yeah.
To make the higher commissions. So what was your first ever investment? The first ever investment property you bought? Yeah,
so it was a bungalow conversion. So it was a 50s bungalow, and basically those properties are perfect for duplex conversions. It's got the door in the back that goes right down to the basement. So we put in a basement apartment there, refinance that property and use those funds to buy another property. So it worked out really well. It was almost like the BRRRR before I knew what BRRRR was. And that was a great investment. Then we acquired a condo. Then we refinanced again, and it was good. And these properties were in high growth areas just outside of Toronto in the area I knew really well. Cash flow is very tight though, and that's one of the advantages of multifamily. If you're in a hot market, the rent yield you're getting versus the price you're paying, it's very, very tight. So you're banking more on appreciation, which can be risky sometimes, and because appreciation is never guaranteed. And that makes it hard to bring in capital investors because there's really no cash flow. So fortunately, I knew the market well enough, and I knew the product where we got by. But yeah, it's very tough to buy in those markets and actually cash flow.
For people who don't know, I know coming from the UK, but what's a bungalow? People might not know what.
Yeah, so a bungalow is your single story home. So there's no stairs. You've got your main level, kitchen, bedrooms, and then you just go down to the basement.
That's funny. It's been a while since I've heard that word, but that's what we call them. We don't call them single stories in the UK. They're called bungalow. And in the UK, I don't know if it's similar there, but one-story houses are quite rare. That's why they're called bungalows. It's stands out because it's, they're few and far between, especially where I live. Most properties were 2-story properties when I grew up.
Yeah, bungalows are hot though, because you've got the baby boomers getting older. They don't want stairs anymore. And usually now in my area, people are buying the bungalows, knocking them down, and building their mega mansions on the big lot. So that's, but yeah, I should be saying a garden instead of backyard and all that stuff to use the UK terminology.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar terminology in Canada. So what did you grow your portfolio to of single family properties?
Yeah, it was very few properties, but it was high in price tag because, you know, you're buying one property and it's 750 grand. So we were, what were we up to? One, seven. Yeah, we were probably like 3.5 million, I'd say.
Wow.
In real estate. So, you know, it was good. And I think if we just sat on those properties for 10 years, you know, we would have, you know, prices would have doubled. We would have been okay. But, you know, I'm not sure if you're of the same opinion, but I don't want to just sit back and wait for 10 years and then have things happen. Like I want things done now. So it wasn't, you know, if somebody just wants to buy a couple rental properties and they're working their full-time job and that's just what they want, you know, that's a great way to do it. You know, you have a tenant slowly pay down the mortgage, the property will go up over time. That's it. But if you want your money to have higher velocity, you have to put it in a better vehicle. Like, you know, a multifamily deal or something like that, where you have the scale working in your favor. You've got the stronger cash flow. You know, with the duplex, you know, one tenant moves out, there goes 50% of your revenue overnight. You just don't have that in a larger apartment deal. So, you know, so many pros and cons, but that's why I made the switch. When my son was born, you probably experienced this too, but, you know, I remember holding my son for the first time. He was fresh. And I just had, like, in that moment, I just knew I wanted to do better and be better, not for myself anymore, but for my son. You know, because I think when you don't have kids, everything you're doing is for yourself. But as soon as you have somebody else to look after, everything becomes about them. And I think that's a lot more powerful. And it made me really think about, because for the next couple of days, I was thinking, okay, well, how can I do better? I knew I'd made more money with the houses I own than actually working and selling houses. So I knew I needed to acquire more real estate, but then, you know, I couldn't go big enough with the houses. So that's when I discovered commercial real estate and then started researching, well, do I want to do industrial, retail, office, multifamily? And I really dived into that. But yeah, I have my son to thank, because, you know, he was a fresh baby, you know, 1 minute old, and he had a huge impact on my life from that point forward. So,
yeah, at that point, there's bigger consequences to our actions, right? If we want to not do much or whatever we want to do with our lives, that's up to us. But when you have that responsibility of having a kid, it changes a lot of things, I think.
Oh, huge. And then, you know, kids, they're watching everything you do. Mm-hmm. So from that point onwards, like, you can't, you know, it's one thing to say, like, this is the biggest, you know, growing up, your parents say, oh, well, do this, but then they go and do the exact opposite. So for me, I wanted to really show my son through my actions. So I have to do big things and accomplish lots of things to show him what's possible. I don't want to be that old guy, you know, in 20 years saying, oh, well, you should go invest in real estate, even though I couldn't do it myself. I want to be able to show through me actually doing it and lead by example. Because, you know, like, he's 4 now. He watches like a hawk. Like, you don't think he's watching, but kids will absorb everything you do. So you have to make sure you're on point and setting a good example at all times.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I've noticed with my son, and he's only 14 months, is he just copies so much of what we do. It's just unbelievable. I really think that, just like you said, you can say what you want, like tell them, like, oh, you should do this or should do that, but ultimately they're going to follow and repeat what we've done. And I think that's important, so important that the example that we set and the actions that we take are the right ones for them.
Oh, and you'll find over the next couple of years, like, you'll have a mini me. Because, like, everything, like, you know, if I'm shaving and stuff, he'll want to shave and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But so then you said you dived into commercial and you looked at, you know, all the different commercial niches. Why multifamily? Why did you choose multifamily?
Yeah, well, I felt, you know, multifamily from, well, a couple different reasons. One, I felt like I felt like I knew the product already, because, you know, I was selling houses, I was dealing with duplexes and single family homes. Multifamily is like a duplex, but on a much larger scale. You've got different units. I understand, what tenants are looking for, amenities, upgrades. It's just one way you think about multifamily real estate. It's like a house flip, but on a much bigger scale over a longer period of time. So, if you're comfortable with working with single family homes, doing renovations, dealing with tenants, adding extra units, multifamily is just that on steroids. Rather than, an industrial lease or, a retail office space. I know many people who are succeeding exceptionally well in those spaces, but I just felt my skill set and what I knew. I understood the multifamily space because I'd lived it, but on a very smaller scale. And then also what I found speaking with potential investors, I found people can relate to multifamily because of everything I just mentioned. They know about houses, they watch the shows on TV. So, if somebody's like, oh, well, what is the value add? Well, have you seen house flipping on TV? Yeah, well, we do that, but with apartment buildings on a much larger scale. So those are the reasons why. Also, you look at how multifamily has performed over the past couple of recessions. Multifamily bounces back faster. The downturn is a lot shorter. You have less rent decline for a shorter period of time. So there's all sorts of benefits to multifamily. Lenders love it. CBRE released a report last year, and they called multifamily the most stable asset class in real estate because of all those factors. So I felt it was a really good fit. And, I'm glad I went along that road because I feel I'm able to communicate. When I'm talking with investors, my broker experience really helps me talk about, upgrades. Well, what are tenants looking for? Well, these are the things we have to change in the unit to get maximum value, because I know about selling houses, right?
Yeah. All of that's true, and it's just easy to understand. I think, right? You've industrial, office, retail. There's a lot more that kind of goes into that in terms of understanding. But everyone understands putting a tenant in there and they pay you rent, right? That's not comfortable because a lot of people, they've paid rent themselves, so they understand that process. So I think that's a great point. That's a lot easier sell to investors.
And you don't have to explain what a triple net is, a triple net lease is, a net lease. And then, profit sharing if you're in like a retail strip mall setting. So that there's lots of things that go into it.
Yeah. So what have you done in the multifamily space? Are you just getting started and getting set in that space?
Yeah. So I got to take part in a 278 unit acquisition last October. We closed on that deal. That was in Orlando. So that was really exciting. And right now, gearing up, looking for the next one. Having the border shut down, like you mentioned, we're in November right now. Yeah, we're in November. We're almost in December. We're still in November.
Which is crazy to think, but
yeah. So the border's shut down. So I haven't been able to drive and look at stuff for a long time. So I may actually end up doing a Canadian deal, just because with the border and the Corona stuff. Who knows how long this is going to last, right? So I may do a Canadian syndication up here. A number of people have approached me to do one because, they have money, they're Canadian citizens, and, they don't want to invest in the States for whatever reason. And they said, hey, can you do a deal up here? So that may be next on the table. I'm setting the groundwork for it now. So next time we talk, I may have a Canadian investment opportunity. Who knows?
That would be cool. But is there a big difference between commercial multifamily and US multifamily?
On a national level, no. The one thing we have to be really cognizant of, especially if you're a value add investor, is rent control. It's Ontario, the province of Ontario. So in Canada, we have two big markets. We have Vancouver, BC, and Toronto, Ontario. The other markets, I guess you could call secondary and tertiary markets. But your big growth where everybody lives is Vancouver and Toronto. Unfortunately, there's rent control in both of those provinces. So, California has rent control, except the Ontario rent control is much stricter than California. And everybody in the States is, oh, well, California is very left wing. Like it's all about, well, Ontario rent control is much worse and much more restrictive. So it's very hard to go into a property in Ontario and push rents because you're limited to between, let's say, 1.8%, which was a couple of years ago. Last year was 2.1%. For next year, for 2021, they've frozen all rent increases because of Corona. So if you're going into a value add deal, you can't raise the rent more than a couple percentage points unless you apply for a special exemption. And then you have to prove that you're worth, a 5% increase. Like you're not going to get a large increase. It's very restrictive with how you can remove tenants. Ontario is a very pro-tenant province. So that's one thing you have to be really aware of. It's not like Texas where, somebody doesn't pay. That's the way it is. Like, see you later. So it's a very different way of doing things. So you have to, in your business planning, you really have to take that into consideration. You're not going to be able to raise your rents within the first year. It's going to be a much longer process than that.
So does that make opportunities there a lot scarcer or not necessarily? It's just a different opportunity?
Yeah, it's different opportunities. If you're really looking to push that value add, your hold time is going to be longer because you still have your tenant turnover. And obviously when a tenant turns over and they've been there for 10 years, you're going to be able to get a big increase. So it does pay off, and then your NOI goes up. It's just a different way of going about it. Commercial real estate, whether it's Toronto or Vancouver and Canada in general, has been very robust. Cap rates are very compressed, just like major markets in the US. So there is a lot of demand for it. But in terms of value add, you have to use a little bit more finesse. When you're approaching your tenant profile, your tenant mix, you have to be really careful with, how long have tenants been there. If you're acquiring a building where everybody's been there for 15 years, chances are they're not going anywhere. So you might have to reevaluate whether that's the right acquisition for you if you're going to be pushing rents.
That's interesting. Yeah. So it's more of a sort of a yield play type thing for the most part, with maybe the hope of, if tenants turn over, that you can increase that rent. Yeah,
like you can certainly encourage tenant turnover, and some people have different ways of going about it. But you have to be very careful because, like I said, Ontario is a very pro-tenant province, so you have to be by the book with everything you do, and the penalties for contravening the law are very steep. So you have to make sure you're always doing things above board.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing, man. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, no worries.
It's all of it's really interesting. The refereeing aspect, then starting as an agent, then having that light bulb moment of, hey, I need to invest, rather than just make other people money, right? You're making money, but it's not that long-term money the same. And that evolution then into multifamily and commercial multifamily is really interesting. So I appreciate you sharing the story. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I like to always incorporate some wrestling related real estate questions, even though the first one necessarily isn't. So the first one is, what would your wrestling name be? If you picked a wrestling name for yourself, what would it be?
How about the referee?
It has to be, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see you coming in the ring in your full refereeing gear and like. Do they give card? No, they just sin bin people in the
that's right. Yeah. There's no cards or anything. So I'd be the referee climbing in, then I get knocked out, then I'm lying on the ground.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, every wrestler has a special move or a signature move, something that they're really good at. What is your special move in real estate, you think?
Well, I would call mine the cash flow elbow.
Okay.
So I'd go down and so I'd say my strength is breaking down complex ideas like a syndication and making it very easy to understand in three simple steps. So I think communicating complex ideas simply to investors would be my strength.
That's a great one, because it's the simpler we can explain it to investors, the better it is, because obviously they're not like us who are watching YouTube all the time, listening to podcasts, trying to educate us as much as possible. They're just someone who has disposable income that they're trying to invest to create a better future for themselves, I think. And if you can make it simple for them to understand, it's easier for them to then invest with you. So I think that's a great skill. This is going to be an interesting one, I think, from what you've said a few times, is what's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your career?
So that single family portfolio I'd created, I'd done so with my my romantic partner at the time. And we had a child together. And then one night she wiped out the bank accounts, stole over 6 figures, changed the locks on the house, stole the car when I was in the gym, and basically left me with nothing. So that was the biggest mistake, because she took all the money from the real estate bank accounts too. And then we had some vacancies, and then she refused to put tenants in the properties to fill the vacancies. So we had no money in the bank accounts. We had properties that were sitting vacant, and things got really, really bad, really, really fast. So I learned my lesson. I call that my very expensive mistake, and I will never put myself in that position ever again.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through that, man.
It was my mistake. So
I love that extreme ownership, right? We always
that's right.
Never point the finger. It's just, if you take responsibility for yourself, you can learn and grow from it. Then, right, from that.
I was thinking with the wrong head, you can say. So you might have to edit that out.
No, we're gonna leave it. I know what you're talking about. So was there a moment then in your investing career that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing was actually realizing that I will not acquire another single family home. That was it, because I was familiar with it. I knew what to do with basement apartments and all that stuff, but not doing that deal and focusing on hunting multifamily deals, because it's so easy to go back to what you know really well, because it's comfortable, it's safe. Mm-hmm. But that's not where you grow. Mm-hmm. So I would say just making that decision and saying, I will never acquire another single family home ever again. So, and that goes to me not even buying my own house. Like I'll be renting because I want my capital hard at work in multifamily deals. So I will never own, for the next however many years, I will not buy my own house because I want that money working in a multifamily deal.
That's interesting, because there's always the talk of, should you own your home or should you rent, right? But I get conflicting thoughts myself about it, because like you said, if you buy your own home, you're putting money down towards that, and you're not getting a return on it. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, you're putting, say, 10%, that's $50,000 that you're tied up in that house, that you're actually paying then to own that house as well. Whereas if you put that $50,000 to work in an investment and you get a 10% return, that's $5,000 that year that you've made, and you're getting that appreciation, that debt pay down as well on that investment. So I think that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, and I love how you use $50,000. I'm thinking of like $1 million house, right, in my area. So I need like $250,000.
Okay. Well, that makes it even a stronger case for not buying as well. For that. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, man. This has been a really fun interview. It's been really interesting. Like listening to your story, man. It's been so cool, and I'm excited for what's coming next for you. Right? Hopefully, you get a deal done in Canada, and we can get you back on. I would love to hear all about the nuances and everything that was involved in that. Because for me, I'm always interested in real estate in other countries, because we always hear about it in the US, and it's not that it's that simple, but we hear it over and over again. But every country is different, so I'm always fascinated by real estate in different countries. But I'm glad you were able to make time and to hear the story, and it was a really fun interview. But before you go, when can people find out more about you? Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about your TV show. If someone's watching this in Canada, where they can watch your TV show. I didn't even get a chance to really dive into that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, by the way, everyone, we're talking to a TV star here right here today, so we should be on.
I actually had a couple of weeks ago, I had a grandma stop me in the grocery store. She's like, "Are you Seth?" So at least the grandma watches my TV show. So the real estate TV show is called Real Estate Simplified. So if you're in the greater Toronto area, you can find it on cable. podcast. It used to be called Purchase to Profits, but nobody knew it was about real estate. So we just renamed it to Real Wealth Through Real Estate. You can find that on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, everywhere. 2 websites you can find me at. Well, first of all, YouTube. I publish a new multifamily video every week. So youtube.com/Seth Ferguson. And you can find my website, sethferguson.org or multifamilyinvestments.co.
Cool. And I'll put all the links to that description below. Well, Seth, like I said at the start, you've been lovely and you really have. It was a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it. Have an awesome day up there in Canada. Go skiing or something, or sledding.
Yeah, that's right. Go snowshoeing.
Take care, man. Hey guys, thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate each and every one of you for listening to the show. I have a lot of fun doing these shows, so I appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. As always, will you please like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate? It really helps me grow this channel and get better guests. And also, more importantly, if you can go on the podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a great review. People really look at that when they look at the show and they consider being a guest. So the more I can grow the show, the better I guess I can get on the show and the more quality I can provide for you guys. So I would really appreciate it. And I've set a goal of reaching 100 5-star ratings and 100 great reviews. So if you guys can go on there, it would take you maybe 5 minutes total. I would really appreciate that. And then if you've done, reach out to me so I can thank you personally for doing that. But yeah, again, thank you for sticking around for the show, and thank you for being a listener to my show. I really appreciate each and every one of you.